Welcome back, baseball fans, at 1974-77 Carryover League Offseason Look Part 2. This is the departure point of our second section, where teams 9 through 16 will be going through some changes. Teams 1 through 8 have 4 guys they want to keep. They still have to jockey the wavered and retired pieces. But now it's time to take a look at teams 9 through 16. We're just showing you the beginning point. And now we'll do the crossfade, and we'll show you the results. Here we go now, and we'll start with Portland. All right, so Portland started this process with 6 guys, even after making a move earlier yesterday. Let's take a look at, see what they did yesterday. I think they had 1 move in here before the day started. Maybe not. Oh, yeah. No, they didn't. They didn't have a move yesterday. It all started today. And it started with a nice trade for 2 teams. Portland made a deal with Texas. Texas has looked at, we need innings that killed us this past year. They already made a trade for Fergie Jenkins. They double up by trading for Nellie Bryles, the 76 Texas Ranger card, as a Portland keeper. They also swap active players. Mike Cubbage, who played for the Rangers in 75, for Ken McMullen. Portland gets a corner guy. Cubbage is a middle guy. And a wavered player is added into this. So that means that Portland gets some money in return for losing Nellie Bryles in that transaction. Then they realized that Danny Cater, they went through the league, and they're like, nobody really wanted the guy. They understood he had 1 year left in 246 with some power, but he's the type of guy that you can find on the waiver list. So Portland puts him on waivers. And that would be the final move for Portland. Portland is at 40301 after that. Montgomery, Martinez. It looks like Bloomberg will practically be kept. He was on the trade list, but you might as well keep the guy. McGraw is still out there on the trade block, but might as well hold on to him too. I mean, these are good players. Just because on the trade block doesn't mean trade them. So that's a case where they're practically keeping him. Let's look at the 40301 of Portland for a moment. We can also clean the sheet up a little bit, move pieces around while we do this. We know it's 40301, but we can just move the pieces into the right spot here and make sure that we have all of the there we go. So they have a 13th hitter, which is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah, and only 7 pitchers, but that's because they have to move one of the wavered guys off the team and replace him with a retired player who would be a pitcher, a position player for a retired pitcher. Not a big deal to do that. And that's just a simple accounting process. So how have they done? Well, they didn't change their pitching staff a whole lot. Bloomberg's still around. Carbo's got a nice card. Martinez, Montgomery, and like I said here, Carbo has a good 75, a better 77, but that's all right. Add the 75 card. Here's the problem in these carryover leagues. As soon as you introduce the 4th year out, there are all these incredible players that you want to get into the league. But there's time. You don't need to get them all in year 1. Sure, you'd get like 77 Carew in because he hit 388. You probably want to do 77 George Foster for, obvious reasons. But you don't have to get every star player in 77 if he has a decent year prior. So they want this guy and that guy in 77. They can keep this guy in 75. And it looks like these are the guys that Portland's going to hang around with right now. Next team is the Angels. And you know what, folks? I'm getting excited about this California Angel team. It's finally starting to happen here. They've made some good trades. And they actually start to look like a baseball team. If you've been watching my broadcast, I've been hammering this team. who really isn't any good until 1979. Yesterday, they moved somebody. Who was it? I thought they moved... No, they haven't talked to the Yankees about Mickey Rivers until today. That's right. Figueroa moved. And, okay. So today, California made some moves. And the first move, yeah. So, and these are happening more and more. Straight up trade. A straight up trade, no balancing, no extra players involved. 75 Gene Locklear for 75 Mickey Rivers. So, this is a case of, by looking at the card, California wins the trade at the beginning because Locklear hits 321 and Rivers hits 286, doesn't draw any walks, can't throw, and is, probably a negative WAR guy, unless you love the stolen bases, of which good luck getting them, but not one of my favorites. So I like the Angels getting a 321 hitter to replace the Richie Scheinblum card they lost. Now the Yankees in the long term can extend Rivers to a 77 card where he hits 326. So this is a case of where straight up trade seemed to make some sense. They weren't done though. I love this trade too. All right, knowing that they could use a center fielder, and they once had Lee Stanton. They once traded Lee Stanton to Baltimore for Andy Etchebarren. Baltimore traded Lee Stanton to the Expos in the Dave McNally Singleton trade. And to complete the circle, the Expos have finally decided to send Lee Stanton back to the Angels. The Expos get a token in this deal because they're sending a keeper, Bob Reynolds, to California. So it's going to cost the Angels a token to do this. The Expos also get Ed Kirkpatrick, retiring player as well, a lefty catcher utility guy to replace John Stevenson. Plus, Gary Carter can catch, but he can also play the outfield. So they have plenty of moving pieces in Expo land. That costs the Angels a token. And they're not done yet. They got one more trade. And this is a sell high on Andy Hassler. So California has a very, very nice Andy Hassler card of 1974. But Andy has a really up and down career, mostly down. So they decided to let it go to Houston for a keeper catcher, Joe Ferguson, and a lefty reliever, which they needed more, in Mike Cosgrove. So California has Dave LaRoche and Cosgrove in the bullpen, Frank Tanana in the rotation. And they moved George Mitterwald to the put on waivers, and they get Joe Ferguson, a nice power-hitting catcher who actually does play for the Angels by 1982, I believe. And California's having a nice off-season now. Now we look over here. I think that's the last move of many, yeah. That's the last move. Okay, so when we look over here, California now wants to keep Nolan Ryan, Bob Reynolds, Joe Ferguson, and Bobby Valentine. They have the 40202. It's much better than where they started. They only lost one token in doing that. They didn't have to pay for Ferguson, and they didn't, they end up with Locklear in that deal as well from the Yankees. Next up, Colorado. This is where the more aggressive Rockies were shopping a Dodger pitcher, Rick Rhoden, versus Toronto shopping another Dodger pitcher, Bert Hooton. Blue Jays wanted way too much for Hooton, understandable. But Colorado was in the, we'll take anybody. And the Dodgers were like, okay, yeah, we want Rick Rhoden. If we can't we got to get our guys back. The Dodger pitching staff gets raided by other teams. So we got Sutton and Messersmith. We need another righty. So they get Rick Rhoden. His 75 card goes back to LA. And they ship Biff Pocoroba a platoon of Steve Yeager, wasn't even a Dodger, to the Colorado Rockies. They also send Jim Brewer in this deal. And no tokens involved either, because Jim Brewer's only got 1 year left. Rodden's got 2 years left, but his career continues. And actually, Pilgarova's career will continue as well. So no tokens involved in this one. I'm only going to put tokens in a trade, first of all, if it looks clearly one-sided. If it's close, I don't want to do that compensation. So, nice move for both teams. Colorado got a good pitcher for a lousy team. I think it's the only thing Colorado did, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Right. So what does Colorado look like here now? They have the extra hitter, so they got to trade a retired hitter for a waived pitcher. But they're going to bring Joe Coleman back. They're going to add Jim Brewer, Al Fitzmaurice. They still have Jim Merritt on this team. They lost Sam McDowell, a retiring pitcher in that trade. So at least they've got a active pitcher for a retiring one. So Colorado, after all is said and done, they started at 3,005 retired guys. It's not that big a deal once you get your fourth keeper, and it's 4 and 4 retirees, because the 2 of your retirees are going to go to waiver players, so no other team in the league is going to get an advantage. It's just a bookkeeping move. Fitzmaurice, Joe List, Joe Coleman, Jim Brewer. And by this point, you see a lot of the teams have their 4 guys they wish to keep. Next up, the Expos. The Expos, they traded the reliever to California, Bob Reynolds. So they're keeping all Expos. Steve Rogers, Bob Bailey, Ron Fairley, Steve Ranko. Kind of going in-house there. They didn't even need, the Expos didn't need Leroy Stanton because of all the outfielders who will be coming to the Expos. They haven't promoted Andre Dawson or Warren Cromartie yet. That might happen this year. But they have Jerry White and Ellis Valentine presently in the outfield. So, and Gary Carter can play the outfield, and they're practically going to add Andre Dawson and probably Warren Cromartie to that list. So we can clean this up for the Expos as well. And they're at the proper number too, 40202. All right, next up are the Yankees. They started with 5 keepers, 3 waiver guys, no retirees. Of course, they have been in a lot of the trades. Yesterday we saw the trade for Figueroa and Pinella, and now the Mickey Rivers trade, and they're still not done. The next move, in a minor move, the Expos, to get that to the proper math, sent John Stevenson to Vegas for another catcher, Ron Hodges. The Expos will be replacing John Stevenson with Ed Kirkpatrick, who can still hit lefties and righties for a left-handed hitting catcher, first base, outfield. That's incredible versatility for Ed Kirkpatrick. Kudos to that guy. But the next move, here it is, folks. And this is one of the rare cases where I just went to Baseball Reference and realized it was a straight-up trade. And it's the easiest thing for me to do is to recreate history and just have Bobby Bonds be traded for Bobby Mercer. And frankly, I'm just not a big fan of the deal. But then I started to look at it a little closely, and I really like the Giants, have liked their way they've been building their roster the last few years. And frankly, having a guy I like a lot, Bobby Mercer, going to the Giants makes me feel happy that he's in a good spot. And if the Yankees blow it with all these moves to get Pinella and Rivers and Bonds, sketchy outfield combos there. Good luck, Yankees, if it works out for them. But I relented to baseball history, and I did the Bonds for Mercer deal straight up. All that really took, by the way, is to just go here for the Yankees and, copy Mercer there, and for the Giants, copy Mercer there and copy Bonds there for the Yankees. So they're going to keep Doc Medich, Thurman Munson, Bobby Bonds, and Lindy McDaniel. They've already added Figueroa, Piniella, and Rivers. The Yankees have done everything they wanted in the offseason, and they've only used one draft token because and that was to get Figueroa. But the Royals didn't get a token, nor did the Angels, because the compensation was the players those teams got in return. Kansas City got a really good Elliot Maddox, and again, the .321 hitting Gene Locklear for 2 years. So that's why the Yankees only spent one token. Good for them, I guess. Enjoy that outfield. Let's go take a look at that team, actually. We can move some of these pieces around. They also have an extra pitcher. They'll have to trade a retiring or waived pitcher for a position player. No big deal either. Okay. But they'll still have Munson, Chambliss, Randolph, Nettles, Gene Michael, and Fred Stanley. Piniella in left, Rivers in center, Bonds in right, and Roy White can be a DH. So all the parts you recognize from the Yankees, other than, of course, Reggie, who Oakland is not going to get rid of anytime soon. All right, let's move on to the next team now. It is the St. Louis Cardinals. Nice moves. Oh, yes. Okay, so let's show you the Cardinal moves here. There were some house cleaning moves involved. Here's a house cleaning move. Another active player trade. When you see green, it means these are active Strat-O-Matic cards in the year of 74. And the Mets send Junior Kennedy to the Cardinals for Joe Torre. Now, this is a very imbalanced trade, so the Cardinals get a token out of it. But for the Cardinals, they aren't really concerned about it. Junior Kennedy is a decent enough utility player. They also have Ted Sizemore and Mike Tyson. So it possibly means that they can bring Templeton on board and get rid of one of those guys. It was really the token they wanted. The Mets have got to figure out how they're going to play Joe Torre at first or third when they already have Milner and Soleta and Wayne Garrett. But they'll find Torre playing time as they would. But it's going to cost the Met a token. So Cardinals get some money. Then to get their accounting okay, they traded Jim Hart for Bob Oliver. They're going to have one more trade coming up, and that'll come up in a bit. We have to go to the next team now. We'll get back to the Cardinals before we're done. Two more teams left, the Milwaukee Brewers. George Scott, Darryl Porter, Jim Colburn, and Tommy Briggs. The big piece they have is Don Wilson. And he would be a trade chip, but he's only got 1 year left in 74. Honestly, it's an okay card. He's 11-13 with a 3.08 ERA, which is nice, and a 131 WHIP. He'd be a good number 3 on your rotation, but he's only going to be there for 1 year. So they weren't going to get a lot in return, but they did find a home. And this is interesting to see who they make the deal with. Detroit and Milwaukee. Milwaukee sends Don Wilson to the Detroit Tigers, who are suddenly, hard to believe, folks, they're talent deficient in Detroit. They only had 3 keepers. So they had to fork up a token to get this fourth guy, Don Wilson, and it's only a 1 year rental for the Tigers. But Don Wilson, in a swap of right-handed pitchers, Milwaukee gets a retired player, so Milwaukee gets a token out of that. When we look at both rosters, Detroit and Milwaukee, Detroit has Kaline getting very old, Jim Northrup getting very old. They traded for Don Wilson and John Hiller, sort of getting old, but he's probably the most effective guy. And they're at the proper math. Milwaukee has finally got it straight. They have Johnny Briggs, Darryl Porter, George Scott, and Jim Colburn. So those are all Milwaukee players for Milwaukee. They just need to get their accounting better. Over here in Milwaukee, we had T. Davis was actually on the wish list. Tommy Davis, no, they don't want Tommy Davis. Tommy Davis probably end up on waivers. And Don Wilson's no longer in the trade block. Which brings us to our final team tonight, and probably one of the most fascinating teams, Houston. When you look at the number of keepers this process started with. So you got to go here and the first digit. The 5, the 3, the 5, the 3. This digit here. And it was Houston who had 7 guys at one time they wanted to keep. Well, they finally figured out who were going to be the guys they would keep. It's Cedeno, obviously. Dave Roberts, a lefty starter. Metzger, a 1 at short. And then Tommy Helms. They all make a ton of sense. One of their pitchers, Tom Griffin, had to be put on waivers because nobody wanted him. But they would have to move 2 guys. One of those was Joe Ferguson. You saw them move him to the California Angels. And I mentioned the Angels and the Cardinals. The Cardinals were going to make a deal with Houston, but before they did that, they had to understand that Tommy Harper really doesn't have anything left. He doesn't have a 700 OPS anymore. So they put Tommy Harper's on waivers. And then a big trade with the Astros. Frank Robinson, we were talking about, let's get him a home. And he likes to travel around the league late in his career. We looked at familiar landing spots. Cleveland didn't have a spot for him. Baltimore didn't have a spot for him. Dodgers, California, the Cincinnati Reds didn't have a spot for him. All the teams he would have played for didn't have a spot for him. He once played for Portland. The Cardinals have a spot for him. He's got Tommy Harper's spot. The DH versus lefty spot. Or the left fielder versus lefty in a platoon with Lou Brock. Could you imagine Lou Brock and Frank Robinson near the end of their careers in a platoon? But Frank Robinson, a Hall of Famer, goes to the Cardinals to the groans of the Reds, Pirates, and Cardinals. But for Houston to get that token, they had to sweeten the deal. The Cardinals demanded the deal be sweetened because they said, hey, Frank Robinson's old. I understand he's a Hall of Famer, but we're not just going to give you a token unless you do a swap of lefties. So Steve Mangori, who wasn't even Houston's property, was sent to St. Louis for Mike Wallace. Mangori is an improvement slightly on Wallace and also has a longer career left. So Houston and St. Louis at this point should have the proper math involved. There's the Tom Griffin moving on to waivers. Houston and the Cardinals. After all that, Houston's at 403.01, just has to move a guy from waivers to retirement. And the Cardinals are at the proper math 402.02. And that's our team. That's our top 16. Now we're at just plus 13 keepers, and they're all down here. Texas is still 1 above, as is Philadelphia, the Giants. Arizona's 2 above. Pirates are 1 above. Oakland's 2 above. Mets are 3 above, but I got some bad news for the Mets. Nobody wants your guys. Seaver, Harrelson, Kuzman, Milner. Nobody wants Max Garcia, Don Hahn, or Harry Parker. So, yeah, they'll probably all end up on waivers. And the Dodgers have an outfielder to get rid of. They got rid of Brewer. That was step 1 for them. They didn't get Hooten, but they got Rick Roden. They still have Joe Decker on the trade block with Davis or Crawford. Crawford's with the Dodgers longer than Davis is. That's a nice piece. There are nice pieces down here in the second half of the offseason because the teams are getting better. A couple of teams that are short. Boston needs a guy, probably in the bullpen. And I think that might be it. The harsh reality as this process goes on, the needy teams up top had first crack at initiating trades and were happy with the guys they got. But by the time you get to the second half, good teams are going to realize that the phone's not ringing and they're just going to have to let talent walk out of the door onto the waiver list and just go to other teams in the league without any compensation in return. That's the ultimate balancing act of the carryover league. We talked about that before. Sal Bando and Gene Tennis cannot both play for Oakland next year. One of the guys has to go somewhere. We talked about Davis. Who else would be a nice piece here? The Pirates, Randy Moffat's not that great a piece. Arizona, Reggie Cleveland, Mike Hegan, Bob Moose, they're not amazing. The Giants extra piece, Tito Fuentes, Red Goodson. Turns out there hasn't been a market for Tito Fuentes yet. The Tigers preferred, instead of Fuentes, who played for them in '77, the Tigers preferred the pitcher from Milwaukee, Don Wilson. Philadelphia has Gary Thomas and Cy Acosta. The Rangers, they have one extra guy. It's, I believe, who's the Rangers? The Rangers are making a lot of trades. Who's their extra guy? Burrows. Oh, either Tom Grieve or Del Unser. Grieve's a Ranger, Unser's not. Unser's a nice piece. He can't play center fielder anymore, but that would be a nice piece to somebody to get. He's a kind of a corner outfielder. Still reasonably good defensively, and I think he played for the Mets and Expos during this timeline. He'd be a nice guy to get. Let me reset the so Unser's here, Unser Grieve. Nelson and Hands are both put on waivers. Boston still wants to get rid of Rick Miller. They got to find a home for him. Bonds has, of course, found his home. There we go. So in the next phase, Boston's looking for bullpen help. Pittsburgh's looking for a lefty reliever. And then there's going to be a lot of stability late in this because Cincinnati, Baltimore, and Atlanta all are going to build within. So they don't really care what everybody else has to offer. And again, the Mets are going to... These final 5 teams, plus there's the White Sox at the bottom here. Again, Bill Melton, Buddy Bradford, Bob Stinson. They're probably not going to find value for any of these guys in trades. But we'll see. Because, again, just because everybody has 4 keepers at the top, they might think about improving them. We haven't heard from San Diego yet with Johnny Grubb, Adrian Garrett, Jim Fregosi, Nate Colbert. We haven't heard from Toronto yet with Elias Sosa, Clyde Wright, Jerry Hairston, Rich Coggins. So there's still other pieces. A lot more to go on in the offseason. But this has been part 2 of the 4-part process, offseason moves. Thanks for checking this out, and we'll see you next time.